Are ghosts real? A friend who can see ghosts. Shirley could not open her eyes. By then, she had been lying in bed, face up, for what felt like an eternity, unable to move, only trembling in fear. At that moment, the cold sweat that had started to form behind her folded knees was the last thing on her mind. She has always been a side sleeper, sleeping in a fetal position with her knees bent. But that night, as she got into bed, before she could even turn to her side, she saw it. A woman, dangling from the ceiling of the room, staring straight at her face. She prayed for it to go away. She knew what it was. It was not the first time that she had seen such a thing. In fact, she had the unfortunate chance to encounter a few throughout her childhood years, and for some odd reason, they stopped showing up for a couple of years until now. They seemed to have left her alone, but not that night. She knew that she was not crazy, like some people might think. She knew her ability to see what others could not, and that night, she knew that she could never get used to it. I met Shirley almost 2 decades ago at a university in England. The fact that both of us were international students from the same country had brought us closer together.
I heard you cut hair. Can you cut mine?
She said to me, the first time we met at her house where she had rented a room, together with some other girls, all of whom, like us, were from the same country. I hesitated a bit, but finally agreed. There was a sense of urgency in her voice, which I later came to know was the beginning of a healing process for a broken heart. The day that she had landed at Heathrow Airport was also the day she had received an email from her ex-boyfriend. He had conveniently decided to dump her. Anyway, good riddance, he deserves no place in this story. When someone can experience or see what nobody else can, it can be difficult for the rest of us to believe in the person. At least at first. You would have to wonder a bit if the person is a liar who craves for attention or not quite all there. Shirley was neither, but it took time for some people at the beginning to accept the fact that there is a possibility that we are living amongst those who are no longer here in body, but whose souls have remained, for one reason or another. When she was 5, Shirley knew she was different from the rest. One night while at her grandparents' house, she was alone and half asleep in the bedroom upstairs, with the doors closed. Despite that, she could feel the presence of someone in the room. She did not understand what was going on, all she could feel was fear. She felt someone sitting at the edge of her bed, slowly moving towards her, sitting down each time, inching closer and closer, towards where her head was, resting on the pillow. Her fear dissipated when she realized that it was her grandfather. But how was it possible? He had been bedridden for weeks. The next day, she realized that he had come to visit her for the last time. She learned that her grandfather had in fact died in his sleep. That was just the beginning of what was about to come for Shirley, because many years later, unlike her grandfather, who had died peacefully of old age in his sleep, this time, it was the spirit of a woman with demon-like presence that would disrupt her life. Something so awful had happened to her, that even in the afterlife, she could not find peace. The first time Shirley met her at 13, was the night she had to unpack her belongings, ready for a new life in her shared dormitory room. Her parents had decided to enroll her in one of the top boarding schools in the state. As she started unpacking her belongings into the locker, she could see from the corner of her eyes the woman staring right at her. Her presence, full of darkness and anger. She lunged for Shirley as soon as she realized that she could see her. All hell broke loose. Shirley was uncontrollable, screaming and crying in fear, seemingly out of nowhere. Because for those who could not fathom as to what she had just seen and experienced, they were convinced that she had gone mad. Especially her roommates. For some reason though, as much as the evil spirit had wanted to attack her, somehow she could never seem to get closer. Always a few feet away. Shirley was not sure why, but had later decided to believe that it was the Bible that she had kept beside her bed. After the incident, Shirley had refused to step out of the room, so the custodians had no choice but to call her parents into the college. Seeing how grave her condition was, they called the pastor and begged for him to go all the way to the dorm in order to say prayers and to get rid of whatever that was haunting her. At the risk of sounding like a cliché horror story, featuring the famous Ed and Lorraine Warren, I have never doubted Shirley's story. If you know her, she would never embellish the truth. A straight talker, always goes by the facts. She believes in the laws of science, in fact an engineer today. If she were not able to see such a thing and did not experience it for herself, I bet you she would probably be on the other side of the group too, a skeptic. As time goes by, it was revealed that several years back, an accident had happened at the compound of the dormitory. It was said that the groundsman who was working on repainting some parts of the building had used a faulty ladder. His wife, who had been assisting him nearby, came to the rescue, but was crushed to death when he had fallen on top of her. The autopsy later found out that she was in the early stages of pregnancy. People believed that she knew about it and was waiting to break the news to her husband until the tragedy struck, and she never had the chance. Because of the steep paganism practiced amongst the locals and the couple themselves, some rituals were done in order to appease her soul, but to no avail. People find it hard to explain, but they could feel the heaviness looming around the place where the incident had occurred. Shirley had recalled that the spirit of the woman did not just suddenly disappear one day after the pastor had come to pray, but that every time she reappeared, she had somewhat seemed further than the last time. The distance between them kept growing as time goes by until one day, she could not see her anymore. It was hard to say where the spirit had gone to, or that, if it ever did find peace. That night though, as she closed her eyes, fully aware of what was staring down at her, she wished that it were just a vivid nightmare. In fact, there was another person in the room with her. Her roommate, deep in Isha prayer, the fifth and the last prayer to be performed in a day for Muslims. Her roommate, always courteous, had made it a habit to pray in the dark at night in order not to wake Shirley up. As soon as she could hear her roommate finish her prayer and picking up her sajada, the prayer mat, she wasted no time in asking her to turn on the lights.
Noor, can you please turn the lights on?
Shirley said desperately, while still closing her eyes. This has caught Noor by surprise, thinking Shirley was already deep in her sleep.
Oh my God, you scared me. You're still awake?
When she finally had the courage to open her eyes, the woman who was dangling from the ceiling of their room was no longer there. Because she had not known Noor for long, only a few months by then, not wanting to scare her and for her to think that she's crazy, she replied.
Yes, I was trying to sleep but couldn't. I think it's the coffee I drank. I'm thinking of going over to my boyfriend's place to do a bit of studying tonight, so don't wait up for me, okay?
That night, Shirley did not spend the night there. The next day, she had decided to go back to her room and spend the night there. However, she was not the 13-year-old kid anymore. Now that she is in her final year of college, she did not want to be paralyzed with fear and be restricted by her gift of being able to see things that others cannot. It was not strange, because it happens sometimes, Some ghosts would only show themselves to her once, so when the woman she saw dangling from the ceiling of her room did not appear anymore, Shirley, apart from feeling relieved, did not linger with the thought for too long. Until one day, Noel came bursting into their shared room.
Shirley, did you hear? One of the girls. From the room upstairs right above us. She hung herself a few days ago.
What do you mean hung herself?
They said from the ceiling. I heard she failed her thesis.
Apparently, that was the last time she had seen a ghost. Before going to England, that is. Just a few months after the incident, she had decided to do her master's there, after college. Shirley and I became close friends almost immediately, and it did not take long for her to open up to me. Her stories intrigued me, because just a year before meeting her, I went to the cinema with some friends to watch The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It brought back memories from my childhood growing up as a Catholic. Needless to say, and even with a bit of shame, I could not sleep well for almost a week after watching it. Growing up Catholic, it was not unusual to hear stories from my parents and the grown-ups around me about demonic possessions or ghosts. I remember the day we gathered at the church compound to watch the Eucharistic miracles of Julia Kim from Norju, South Korea, who also came to our small town in the 90s. Somehow, I could not sleep for many days just thinking about it. There are many articles about this online, if you are interested. She was later proven false, not recognized by the Catholic Church, and was excommunicated. A quote-unquote script from a Roman Catholic theology website. These false Eucharistic miracles are, of course, not true miracles from God, but only apparent miracles brought about by the action of fallen angels or by human deception. Anyway, just like the whole saga, and speaking from a personal point of view, I was brought up to believe in the possibilities of the supernatural realm. Or even preternatural, with demonic origins, and to recognize human deception. Nevertheless, even without the religious upbringing, I imagined that it would be ungenerous of me not to give somebody so close to me the benefit of the doubt. Especially when somebody decides to open up and reveal his or her most vulnerable side, like Shirley. On the summer of 2006, Shirley and I decided that we would stay back in England for our summer break. Unlike the rest of our friends, who went back either to their home countries or to go backpacking around Europe, we decided that we would spend a few days in London before heading back to Sheffield before the starting of the new semester. In London, the only place that we could afford to sleep was on a bunk bed at a youth hostel, so that was where we spent a few nights. At first, Shirley was a bit apprehensive at the thought of staying in an old hostel. She did not know if the place was haunted or not. The fact that she had already spent a couple of months in England, in a centuries-old city, and what more to say, living as a tenant in a house that was probably more than 100 years old, without seeing any ghosts, was surprising to her. She joked that perhaps British ghosts would not reveal themselves to foreigners. We did not think much about it and managed to enjoy most of the touristy spots in London until a few days had passed without any ghostly incidents. Then came the last night. We had decided to dine at a fancier restaurant, which was quite a distance from where our hostel was. Because of that, we had to take the London Underground tube, and that was what we did come evening. The restaurant was located in a small and quaint alley. It was a network of small alleys, all connected to one another, and some leading to dead ends. You can find restaurants, or some small shops, selling antiques or handicrafts there. I imagine we could have spent the entire day there, but that day, we decided to head there only in the evening, just for the restaurant. After our wonderful dinner, we roamed around the place for a bit, since it was not too late yet. We were laughing and chatting as usual, marveling at the ancient British architecture, most of all. When suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, Shirley started screaming.
Run! There's a guy chasing us! I think he's mad!
I did not even stop to look, or think, because by then, Shirley was already a bit ahead of me, so I started running behind her. My heart was beating fast and my knees felt like they were about to buckle. Mostly by the imagination of a madman chasing after us, with an intent to cause harm. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only for a few seconds, I decided to turn my head to look back, to check and gauge if we had made a safe distance between us and the guy. I have never felt such a relief as soon as I noticed that the guy was no longer behind us.
Oh my God, Shirley! I think he's gone! He's not there! You think he's hiding somewhere?
I asked frantically. Shirley, who looked as pale as a ghost, shook her head and said,
I don't know! He's not behind anymore? Are you sure?
Just then, a man with a concerned look on his face suddenly appeared.
Is everything all right there?
It was only then that we realized that we had stopped outside of a forest.
Yes, there was a guy chasing us. He came out of nowhere, but he's gone now. I'm sure he's hiding somewhere.
Shirley replied, still visibly shaken. I have never seen her that scared before.
But if you came from that direction, then he might still be there. It's a dead-end alley.
The man said, while pointing towards the direction from which he saw us running. The man was kind enough to accompany us back to where we came from to check and hopefully confront the guy. It was important for him to know too, if there was a dangerous man lurking near his flower shop. We briefly looked into all the shops on our left and right, as we walked down the alley, back from where we came from. There was no strange man. Everything was quiet except for some visitors, who looked nothing like the man Shirley saw.
Girls, it seems like he's gone for real. I don't know how is it possible for him to escape without walking past us.
The man said, sounding confused too.
Anyway, I will keep a lookout for you, if you girls want to continue walking around here.
We thanked him, but decided to make our way to the train station, to head back to the hostel, as it was already getting a bit late. While making our way to the underground tube, Shirley and I were mostly glad that nothing bad had happened to us. There were more people on the main street at that point, so even if the guy had somewhat decided to reappear, I guess it would be easier for us to ask for help, if we needed one. After scanning our Oyster card, we finally made our way to the platform, which was quite a long walk. As you can imagine, both of us, who were not completely over with what had just happened, were still hyper-aware of our surroundings. We turned back to look several times, to make sure that no suspicious-looking guy was following us.
What did he look like?
I asked Shirley, after we reached the platform. Now waiting for the train to arrive.
He was tall, had a thick beard, wearing all black. He wore a beanie and a long trench coat.
She had wanted to continue describing him until she stopped suddenly mid-sentence.
Oh my God! That's him!
She said frantically, pointing towards the direction at the opposite platform. The back of my hair stood up. Because there was no one there. That was the first time I had experienced being beside someone who could see what I could not. It was terrifying. Especially if you know that it was real. I cannot say for sure who was more scared that day. But one thing for sure is, I have never seen anyone looking as scared as Shirley had that day. Thank you for watching and subscribing. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to stay tuned.